Today I'm going to talk about the day that at the will reading, my parents said I got nothing. They didn't know I'd already read it. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. My name is Margaret. I'm 25, and this is the story of the day I learned that being a daughter in my family meant absolutely nothing. The last time we were all together was for my father's will reading. It was held in the study, where everything smelled of cigars and leather, where I wasn't allowed as a child. My parents sat at the polished oak table like royalty, and my sister Clarissa, 3 years older, had that smug look she always wore when she was about to get everything she wanted. The lawyer cleared his throat. Per Mr. and Mrs. Lennox's updated estate plan, the entirety of the family trust and assets will be passed to their eldest daughter, Clarissa Lennox. No one looked at me. My mother adjusted her scarf, barely hiding a smirk. Margaret's always been so independent. We knew she wouldn't need anything from us. My father added, she's always said she wanted to make her own way. This just gives her the freedom to do that. That wasn't true. I never said anything like that. But I didn't flinch, because I had already read the will 2 weeks before. I'd been home visiting under the excuse of helping with the garden. The only time they ever really wanted me there. I found the draft of the will on my father's desk, just sitting there, as if they didn't care if I saw it or not. Or maybe they never imagined I would dare to open it. I read every word. The betrayal didn't come just from the money. It came from the way they described me, as distant, uninterested in family affairs, emotionally volatile. A liability. That word burned. Clarissa didn't even bother to hide her delight. She leaned toward me after the reading and whispered, "Don't take it personally, Mags. You were always a bit different." Different. I walked out without saying a word. That night, in the guest room, the smallest one, with the cot-like bed and no heating, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My childhood came back to me in broken pieces. School plays they didn't attend, birthdays they forgot, the way my mother used to sigh every time I spoke. I remembered being 15 and winning a statewide writing competition. I placed the certificate on the fridge. The next morning it was gone. Clarissa had made regionals for tennis that same week, and her photo was plastered on every wall in the house. I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. I left early the next morning, before anyone woke up. Drove back to my tiny apartment in the city with my clothes in garbage bags and a stomach full of lead. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just disconnected. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. For the first few days, I tried to go about my life as usual. I worked at the bookstore during the day and wrote at night. But something in me had shifted. I was no longer waiting for them to notice me. The last thread had snapped. A week later, I received a message from an old family friend, Mrs. Donnelly, who used to bring us baked goods every Sunday. She asked if I had received the box my grandmother left for me. I had no idea what she meant. Your grandmother, Margaret. You were her favorite. She said she had something set aside for you. Didn't your parents give it to you? No. Of course they hadn't. Mrs. Donnelly insisted on meeting. She handed me a small, battered box wrapped in floral paper, clearly decades old. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. My grandmother had written to me every year on my birthday since I was 6. None of them had reached me. She talked about how proud she was, how she saw the light in me, how sorry she was that my parents didn't know how to love me properly. She described moments we shared that I had forgotten. Baking cookies together. Her sneaking me books my mother deemed too serious. I felt like I'd been robbed twice. Once of money, and once of the only love that had ever been real. But something strange happened as I sat with those letters. I began to feel something solid inside me, like the letters stitched a part of me back together that had been torn for years. They didn't just abandon me. They tried to hide that someone had loved me. That night, I pulled out an old notebook and began to write again. Not fiction this time. Not make-believe families and second chances. I wrote about my own life. My own erasure. My own voice. And I swore I would never let them silence me again. What I didn't know was that Clarissa had more secrets. And I was about to uncover something that would shatter the version of the past they had always fed me. Something that would change everything. 2 weeks after the letters from my grandmother, I found myself staring at Clarissa's Instagram late one night. Her life looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Brunches at rooftop restaurants, designer handbags, champagne glasses clinking under perfect lighting. I knew the pictures weren't real, not really, but they still made something ache in me. In one photo, Clarissa stood beside my parents in front of the family house, holding up a set of keys. The caption read, "New chapter begins. So grateful." I stared at the screen for a long time. That was supposed to be both our home. My mother had promised, once, when I was 13 and had asked if I'd ever live there as an adult. "Of course," she said. "This house will always be yours too." Lies. All of it. Later that week, I got a call from Daniel. He was our neighbor growing up, the quiet boy who used to help me rescue birds from the garden and patch up their wings. We hadn't spoken in years, but he'd seen me at the will reading. "I didn't want to say anything back then," he said, "but I thought you should know. Your sister, she said things about you. Back in high school. To your parents. Things that weren't true." I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. "What kind of things?" "That you were stealing. That you were unstable. She used to say you'd run away one day. That you hated them." "I never." "I know," he interrupted gently. "I knew it wasn't true. But your parents believed her. They always did." My stomach twisted. It all started to click. The distance, the coldness, the quiet punishments I could never explain. Clarissa had been painting me as the problem for years. After we hung up, I pulled out a box I hadn't opened in ages. It held old journals, sketchbooks, report cards. I flipped through pages of my handwriting, desperate, hopeful, angry. And then, tucked between the pages of a high school notebook, I found a folded paper I didn't recognize. It was a printout of an email. From Clarissa to my father. Subject, Margaret. "Dad, I'm worried about Margaret. She's been acting strange lately, sneaking out, staying up all night, not eating. I think she's doing something she shouldn't. I hate to be the one to say this, but maybe it's time to stop indulging her behavior. It's not good for the family." No date. No context. But it felt like a dagger. She wasn't just favored. She had rewritten me. I spent that night sitting on the kitchen floor, the email in one hand, a mug of cold tea in the other. I remembered coming home one night in high school to find my parents waiting in the living room. They accused me of skipping class, smoking, lying. I hadn't done any of it. I cried. They didn't believe me. That night had haunted me for years, and now I knew why. Clarissa had poisoned them against me. That realization didn't bring the satisfaction I thought it would. It brought grief. I had been trying to earn love that was never really mine to have. The next day, I took a walk to clear my head and found myself standing outside the apartment where my grandmother had lived. It had been sold years ago, but just seeing the building made me feel a little less alone. A neighbor, an older woman with a kind face, recognized me. "You're little Maggie, aren't you? Margaret's girl? She used to talk about you all the time." We talked for a few minutes. She told me about how my grandmother had tried to get custody of me once. Said she thought something was wrong in that house. But no one listened. I stood there in shock. I went home and began to write again, this time with clarity. I wrote down everything I remembered. The way Clarissa would tell me to stop being dramatic, the way she always seemed to know just what to say to make me doubt myself. How she'd hug me in front of our parents, but hiss cruel things when no one was around. She was the golden child, but she had built her throne on my silence. That night, I got a text from Clarissa. "Heard you've been digging through old stuff. Hope you're not planning to cause drama. That wouldn't look good for you." I stared at her message. And I smiled. She was scared. I didn't know it yet, but the past wasn't the only thing she'd manipulated. What I would soon discover would turn everything I believed upside down. What would you do if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss the next story. Clarissa's message stayed on my phone screen for hours. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. I wasn't going to play her game anymore. Instead, I started digging. I returned to the box of letters from my grandmother and noticed something I hadn't before. A reference in one of the letters to a small apartment she had purchased in my name years ago. "It's nothing grand, my sweet girl," she wrote, "but it's yours. I just wanted you to always have a place where you were loved." It didn't make sense. I'd never heard of it. No one had ever mentioned it. I called Mrs. Donnelly. She confirmed it. Yes, she bought it shortly after your 10th birthday. Said she didn't trust your parents to look out for you in the future. I thought they'd told you. Of course they hadn't. With her help, I tracked down the paperwork. My name was still on the deed. The apartment was old, tucked in the quiet corner of a sleepy neighborhood 2 towns over. The building smelled like dust and wood polish. Inside, it was frozen in time, furniture covered in sheets, curtains yellowed with age. But it was mine. There were boxes in the closet, filled with photos of me and her, drawings I'd made, birthday cards, newspaper clippings of every tiny thing I'd ever done. She had saved it all. Proof that I had mattered to someone. I sat on the floor of that apartment for hours, surrounded by pieces of a life I never got to know. There was an envelope in the drawer of her bedside table with my name on it. "Margaret, if you're reading this, then they didn't tell you the truth. I'm sorry. I tried to fight for you. I hope someday you understand that none of this was your fault. You were never hard to love. They were just too broken to see you clearly. This is your place now. Make it yours. Build something better." I cried for the first time in months. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind of cry that empties you out and then quietly makes room for something new. The next few weeks, I spent every spare minute cleaning and restoring the apartment. Painting the walls. Replacing the curtains. Fixing the creaky cabinets. I used money from my bookstore job, little by little. Every nail I hammered felt like a piece of myself settling into place. I told no one about it. Not even my closest friends. Meanwhile, Clarissa kept posting photos that screamed perfection. New designer bag, new vacation, new car. I knew she was using the inheritance. The irony was bitter. But I no longer envied her. There was nothing real in her world. And then one afternoon, I got a message from her husband, James. We barely knew each other. He'd always been polite in a distant way, the kind of man who smiled too much but said little. "Can we talk?" "Just us." I met him at a cafe near my apartment. He looked exhausted. Nervous. "I'm not trying to get involved," he said. "But I thought you should know what she's been saying." He told me Clarissa had been trying to convince him that I was mentally unstable, that I had a history of breakdowns, that I had fabricated the story about the will. "She even said you were stalking her," he added, almost embarrassed. "I've seen the letters. She's rewriting everything." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what she'd done our whole lives. Gaslight. Erase. Rewrite. "I believe you," James said quietly. "And honestly, I'm starting to see her clearly now." We didn't talk long. But it was enough. Enough to know that Clarissa's empire was built on borrowed lies. And it was starting to collapse. A week later, I got another surprise. The lawyer who handled my grandmother's estate called me. "She left one more thing," he said. "A storage unit in her name designated for you. I just found the paperwork." I went the next morning. It was a small, rusted unit on the edge of town. Inside were boxes, dozens of them, all labeled with dates, photos, letters, recordings, journals, and financial records, including handwritten notes from my grandmother about conversations she had with my parents. One entry hit me like a freight train. "Today, I offered to split part of the property between the girls. Clarissa got upset. Said Margaret was not like us. My daughter agreed. I see now what they're doing. They're isolating her. I fear one day she'll believe them." I sat down on the concrete floor and stared at that page. They had orchestrated this for years, systematically cutting me out, shaping the narrative. But now I had the truth. Tangible. Undeniable. Clarissa could try to lie, but she couldn't erase this. What I did next wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it would shift the power in a way no one in my family expected. I didn't confront Clarissa. Not yet. Instead, I made copies. Every letter. Every journal page. Every document from that storage unit. I bought a scanner and organized everything into folders, labeled by year. I kept backups in 3 separate places. My grandmother had given me the truth, and I wasn't going to risk losing it. Then I went quiet. For a month, I stopped posting online. Stopped replying to family texts. Stopped showing up where I might run into them. Clarissa sent 2 short, sarcastic messages. Still playing victim? And later, silence isn't strength, Margaret. It's just bitterness. I didn't respond. In that silence, I rebuilt. I painted the final walls of the apartment. I filled the bookshelves with everything I loved. Novels, notebooks, even the children's books my grandmother used to read to me. I adopted a stray cat that wouldn't leave the building's front step. I named her June, after my grandmother's birthday month. And slowly, the silence became peace. Then one evening the silence broke. My mother showed up at my apartment. I opened the door just a crack. She looked smaller than I remembered. Less polished. Her lipstick was smudged, and her eyes flickered around like she was expecting someone else to appear. "Margaret," she said, as if tasting the name for the first time. I didn't invite her in. She stood there for a long moment before speaking again. "Your father had a minor stroke. He's recovering at home. Clarissa's overwhelmed. We thought you might come by." I blinked. "No apology?" I asked. She shifted. "This isn't about the past. It's about family. You still have one." I stepped outside, closed the door behind me. "Do I? Because I remember sitting in that study while you watched someone hand everything over to Clarissa like I didn't exist." Her face twisted. "It wasn't like that. You misunderstood." "I didn't misunderstand anything. I read the will before you even read it aloud. I read the letters. I read the files you never wanted me to see." That shut her up. Her mouth opened, then closed. Her hand twitched like she might reach out, but didn't. "I don't want money," I said. "I never did. But I won't let you rewrite what you did. I won't let you erase me again." She blinked fast, like tears were forming. "We were trying to protect the family," Clarissa said. I know what Clarissa said. "I have copies." I watched her face drain of color. "She lied," I said. "For years. And you believed her because it was easier than loving me." She didn't deny it. I turned and went back inside, closing the door slowly. She didn't knock again. The next day, Clarissa showed up. She came to the bookstore, of all places. She marched in wearing designer sunglasses, and a dress that looked like it cost a month's rent. "Really, Margaret?" she hissed, leaning on the counter. "Dragging Mom into this now? Playing the wounded orphan?" I looked up calmly. "Get out." Her face twisted. "You think anyone will believe you?" I smiled. "I don't need them to." Later that night, I sent James a folder. I didn't explain it. Just attached a PDF with selected documents. The emails. The journal entries. The evidence. The next day, Clarissa's Instagram went quiet. A week later, James moved out. He sent me a short message. "Thank you. I needed to see the truth." I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. I thought that would be the end of it. But then my father called. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was shaky. "I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't know how much I didn't see. I thought you should know I've changed the will. Clarissa won't like it, but that's not my concern anymore." I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel vindicated. Just relief. Not because of the money. I didn't even know what he meant. But because for the first time in my life, someone in that house acknowledged they'd been wrong. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't a reunion. It was a release. That night, I walked to the apartment's little balcony. June curled at my feet. I lit a candle and sat with my grandmother's last letter in my hands. I whispered, "I found my place." She had given me more than a home. She had given me a way back to myself. But the story wasn't done yet. Clarissa wasn't used to losing, and her next move would push everything to the edge. It started with an email. Subject line: "Cease and desist." Clarissa had hired a lawyer. She claimed I was defaming her, that I had shared private family communications with third parties, and that unless I deleted all references to her and stopped spreading falsehoods, she'd take legal action. I read the email 3 times. It didn't scare me. Not anymore. I forwarded the message to a friend from college who worked in a legal office. She called me the next day. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. If anything, you could sue her. I didn't want a lawsuit. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. But Clarissa didn't. And when I didn't respond, she escalated. She started contacting people from my past, old classmates, teachers, even my ex-boyfriend from college. Spreading rumors. Trying to stir doubt. One of my former professors emailed me, confused. I heard some strange things from someone claiming to be your sister. You okay? I realized something important that day. Clarissa didn't care about clearing her name. She cared about controlling the story. And when she lost control, she unraveled. She called me the next evening. I let it go to voicemail. Margaret, you think you've won? You don't know what it's like to carry the family name, to be responsible. You always had it easy. You got to be the sad little outsider while I had to keep everything together. You should be thanking me. There was a long pause, then a click. I sat in silence for a long time. That message didn't make me angry. It made me sad. Clarissa had lived her whole life with a spotlight on her, but the cost was everything real. She had burned every bridge to hold up a perfect image that was already cracking. She was alone. But that wasn't my responsibility. A few days later, I visited the storage unit again. There were boxes I hadn't touched yet. I opened one marked 1997 to 2000. Inside were VHS tapes. I borrowed a player from the bookstore's back room and sat late into the night watching my early childhood. There I was, barely 4, sitting on my grandmother's lap singing, laughing. A birthday party with a tiny cake. Me falling asleep with a book in my hands. And then I saw something else. A clip of a fight. My parents arguing in the background. Clarissa, 6 at the time, sitting at the kitchen table watching. My mother said, "She's always in the way. She's too sensitive. She slows everything down." My father, "She's just a child." My mother, "No, she's a complication." The camera moved suddenly. My grandmother must have turned it off. I rewound and watched it again. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. They had seen me as a burden from the beginning. That moment gave me something I hadn't realized I still needed. Permission to stop trying. That weekend, I held a small gathering at the apartment. Just a few friends, Mrs. Donnelly, Daniel from next door. I didn't tell them everything. Just enough. We ate, laughed, played music. It was the first time I let people into the space that had become my world. It wasn't about replacing my family. It was about choosing one. James sent me one final message. She's leaving town. Took what's left of the inheritance and moved to California. I don't think she'll come back. I didn't respond. But I did breathe easier. And then a letter arrived in the mail. It was from my father. Margaret, I don't know if you'll read this. Your mother doesn't want me writing to you. She says it will only cause more trouble. But I owe you something. I let you be erased. I let Clarissa's version of you become our truth, because I was too weak to push back. I don't expect forgiveness. But I see you now. I see what we lost. And I hope you never doubt again that you deserved more. Dad. I folded the letter and placed it with my grandmother's. Not because it healed everything, but because it mattered. It wasn't closure. It was clarity. But one more secret was still waiting to be uncovered. One final piece that neither Clarissa nor my parents had ever expected me to find. It came on a Tuesday. A certified letter addressed to me, signed by Clarissa's new lawyer. She was contesting the new version of the will. According to her, my father was no longer of sound mind when he amended the document. She accused me of manipulating him during a vulnerable time, claimed I had isolated him, poisoned his view of her. She demanded the will be reverted to the original version, the one that left everything to her. I stared at the letter and laughed. Not out of amusement. Out of disbelief. I hadn't seen or spoken to my father in months. We'd exchanged one voicemail. One. But that was Clarissa's way. If she wasn't winning, she had to blame someone. I didn't answer the letter. I didn't need to. The lawyer handling my father's estate did that for me. He called to reassure me. This is a tactic. A desperate one. Nothing she's claiming holds water. Still, it rattled me. The next day, I drove to the apartment. June met me at the door, tail flicking like she sensed something was off. I locked the door behind me, sat on the couch, and pulled out the old tape again, the one with the argument in the background. I watched it twice. Then I cried. Not for them, but for the child I had been. The one who kept trying to earn love from people who only knew how to perform it for show. That weekend, I got the call. My father had passed away. A second, much stronger stroke. There wasn't time to prepare. The funeral was planned in a matter of days. I didn't want to go. I almost didn't. But something told me I had to stand in that space. Not for him, but for me. The service was quiet, attended mostly by colleagues and distant relatives. My mother didn't look at me. Clarissa stood with her hand gripping our mother's shoulder like a shield. I stood in the back. After the burial, Clarissa approached. She looked different. The polish was still there, but the edges were fraying. Her voice was lower than usual. I hope you're happy. I blinked. Happy? He changed everything for you. You poisoned him against me. You did that yourself. She stepped closer. You think you won? You think getting a piece of property makes up for being nothing for 25 years? I tilted my head. No. But it gave me something you'll never have. Oh yeah? What's that? Peace. She stared at me like she wanted to say something else. But instead, she turned and walked away. I didn't follow. I didn't look back. Weeks passed. The estate was settled. The lawyer called me one last time. There's one more thing. Your grandmother included it in a private clause, to be revealed only if your father passed before you turned 30. He handed me a small wooden box. Inside was a note. My sweet Margaret, if you're reading this, it means time has taken what was already slipping away. I couldn't protect you from them, but I tried to leave you anchors. In this box is the deed to a small cabin by the lake, the one we used to visit when you were little. It's yours. Always was. It's where I wanted you to feel safe. Live there if you wish. Or don't. But no. You were never invisible to me. Love. Grandma. The cabin. I remembered it. Pine trees. A little swing by the water. The sound of loons calling across the lake. I drove there a week later. The place was quiet, weathered but still standing. Still holding its shape, like me. I opened the door. The air smelled of dust and pine. I let it wrap around me like a blanket. Outside, the lake shimmered. I sat on the old swing and let myself be still. Not because there was nothing left to do, but because I had finally done enough. I wasn't a ghost in my own story anymore. I had a name, a place, a history that belonged to me. And this time, no one could take it away. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell and send it to someone you think will also like it.